Hey everybody, so this podcast is titled The Question Challenge. So here's what you do. You go to your kids, particularly teenagers, but maybe younger, even older. If you're an older parent and you've got older kids, ask them this question on a scale of 1 to 10. How free do you feel to come and talk to me about anything? Listen for their answer. It's a great relationship booster to help you have better communication with your kids. So be blessed as you listen.
I have an important question that is very important. That's why I said it's important that you should.
Don't ever ask an unimportant question that's really important.
Right.
Yes.
Because most questions, well, actually not all questions are important, but this is a important question that you should ask your teenagers.
Here's a question I have to ask you before you ask this question. Do our listeners find us funny?
I don't know.
I don't. You know what? We find us funny.
And that's
Forget the listeners.
No, we don't want to forget
Yeah, you're right. We do this for them. Okay, anyways, go ahead.
We're funny. Especially this morning. We're really funny. Because we have learned that if you don't laugh, you might cry or be angry. So it's better to laugh. That was a sidebar for you.
I've never tried crying. I've tried anger.
I've tried crying. And
You don't recommend it?
I don't recommend it.
I don't recommend anger. Let's laugh. Okay. Okay, go ahead. Ask the question. All seriousness, here we go.
Okay.
Time's ticking away.
The question is for you as the parent to ask your teenager. And so the question is this. Can you, on a scale of 0 to 10, how comfortable do you feel with talking with me? Now that might not seem like a big question, but most of the time, not most of the time, but I'm finding raising teenagers that it's hard. It's difficult to communicate with them, especially when they think that they're always right or they know everything and they don't need to know anything from you.
Let's scratch that and say because they think they're always right, not when they always think they're right.
They do.
They do.
And so it is important that we don't create a chasm between us, but that we keep building bridges.
Or a schism.
A schism. I'm not actually sure what a schism is.
Schism is like a friction or there's a problem there.
Right.
You know? And you don't want to have problems and you don't want to have like a void to where you can't communicate with them.
Right.
So I want to throw this kind of back out and say that I think that this is a crazy important question to ask. And we have asked our teenagers this. I think you could go a little bit younger than teenagers. I think even a 10-year-old
I
probably
think so.
would be a good question. But how about adult children? How about if you're 50, 60, 70 years old and you have adult children? Well, we're 40 and we basically have an adult child. But anyways, could you ask them that question and what would their response be? And I think one of the things that, there's a lot of different scenarios as to why they might answer, I don't feel like I can talk to you about things. Or on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, I can tell you anything, 1 being, I can tell you nothing. I feel like we're at a 3. That would be a little bit tough to hear. You might be happy about a 6 or above. Okay, it was good, but there's room for growth. But like really low, there would be some reasons as to why they felt that way. And that could be their problem.
Right.
But most likely, you as the parent, that you are the one, you're the reason why they can't feel like they can come and tell you anything.
Right.
And so that's why I think, ask your teenagers, but I would say at whatever point you are, you don't want to get to a point, even when your kids are older, and then you have grandkids, they're at that age and you're at that age, you don't want them to not want you to be involved in their life. And I mean, how many people have we met to where they don't want their parents involved in their life at any point? They get older and they grow up and it's like, I'm done with this because they grew up underneath of things that made it nearly impossible to talk to their parents.
Right. And so then I think when asking this question, you have to posture, you the one asking the question, so the parent asking the question of the child, have to remain unoffendable. Because right away, if they say...
Which, if you can't, probably speaks to why
Right.
They
And so
can't
then
talk to
you
you.
need to get yourself settled down and you need to start asking yourself questions. What could I do better? And maybe I'm not a good listener. How can I be a better listener? Get yourself prepped. And then when you ask the question, and if it is a low number, that you are non reactionary, that you are not offended, and then you can begin to seek to understand why. And then you follow up the question with, I am sorry that you feel that way. So you now are validating that they have, that you're saying when you say that to them that you've heard them. Mm-hmm. You've heard what they said. They don't feel like they can have a conversation with you, or that you're a good listener, or that they feel good, whatever, when they're in your presence. Right. However, that's coming across. So then you need to follow it up with, if you're calm, what could I do to make you feel better about communicating with me? And let them say to you one or two things.
No matter how hard it is.
No matter
if you want to fix it, you got to hear.
That's right. And sometimes it could be the child. Yeah, I mean, if they start yelling or screaming, or if they get all uptight, then you probably shouldn't. You should stop the conversation. But if they can calmly communicate with you this, then go back even and take it a step further. And so they say, I can't communicate with you because you never listen to me. So then you follow up with, you feel like that I am not a good listener. And then they can keep adding to that, because the more information you can grab from them around that will give you more understanding on how to fix it.
The bedrock for this, it has to be unoffendable communication.
That's right.
And the word talks about that the parents are supposed to lay up for the children. It's not if you have broken relationship, fellowship with your child, it's not their job to fix it. It's your job as the parent to fix it.
Right.
And so whether you think you have a good communication relationship with your child or not, it's still a great question to ask.
That's right.
Because they might feel like, you know what, I really love you, but sometimes I don't really feel like I can tell you certain things because of XYZ reasons.
Right.
So no matter how you feel like your relationship is, it's good to ask the question so you can improve as a parent, because it is your job, it's our job as parents to be able to fix whatever it is that's broken with our children. Mm-hmm. That requires humility. It doesn't require you backing down from what you know is right, because sometimes, especially when you're dealing with teenagers, and we were this way too, teenagers just think they're right about everything. It's because you come into, your eyes are aware, you're out of the innocent stage, and you feel like you can grab the world by the tail. And then when you live 20 years, you realize, okay, well, I didn't know as much as what I thought. So, and so you just have to navigate that with your kids. But even with that, sometimes parents can become offended at their teenagers, as if they weren't a teenager themselves at one point and thought just like a knucklehead, just like they do. And so there's like no grace there. And I think that's one of the reasons why people, like if a child said, honestly, I'm going to give you, out of a scale of 1 to 10, you know what, Mom, I'm going to give you a 4. Well, why is that? Well, it's because you make me feel bad whenever I tell you stuff. And sometimes people raise their children in a judgment environment, in a punishment
culture,
feeling environment. That's the culture they create. Yeah. And so, like, who wants to come and tell you their difficult stuff? Like, no kid is going to want to come and tell you that they're struggling in this area or that, or they're having these thoughts, or whatever the situation is. They're not going to want to come and tell you anything, because you're going to make them feel condemned for it.
Right.
Well, there's no growth and there's no freedom in condemnation. It's a ploy of the devil. And if you are causing your kids to feel condemned, and like they're always going to be judged and punished for what they're doing or what they tell you, I mean, there's no
reason for them to even come and tell you.
Why would they come tell you? They're going to avoid you.
Right. I would say that natural human being, we don't want to experience shame and guilt.
We weren't built to.
And condemnation. So we'll avoid situations that will bring that on us, which means sometimes then avoiding relationship with people we
that make you feel condemned.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And so then as the parent, we have to make sure that we are not giving that off. Like, we're not having this punishment or critical culture. Like, okay, teenagers are absurd in their thinking sometimes. Like you said, knuckleheads. Like, they don't think right. And
Right.
their logic is most of the time so illogical.
Yeah.
And sometimes we punish them for that instead of saying,
Just because they're underdeveloped in their thinking doesn't mean we should punish them.
right, because at one point, like you said, we were
Underdeveloped.
We were underdeveloped in
Yeah.
our thinking. And so it's not saying you're wrong or how dumb of you or how stupid of you to think that way. It's helping them to navigate.
Even if they need to hear it.
Right.
Even if they need to realize that their perspective is totally off, you pointing it out is probably the reason why they don't feel like they can come and talk to you about
Right.
things. And the thing is that the Lord, He treats us like, when you compare us to the Lord, we're more underdeveloped compared to the Lord than our teenagers
Right.
are compared to
Right.
us. Now look at the mercy He has on us.
Right.
So we need to be able to have this relationship with the teenagers and any child, that we just allow them to be who they are. And it doesn't mean that we don't train them, but what happens is then sometimes in our pursuit of this has to be different, it's got to be right, it's got to be fixed, we push them away because we don't allow them to have a voice, and there's not room for making mistakes. If there's no room for making mistakes for yourself and for your children, you're going to have a really, really difficult time raising them. I could take this as far
And
as your spouse
they'll
too.
run away,
There's not room
yeah.
for your spouse to make mistakes. So you have to have an environment where people can make mistakes and not feel shamed and judged for it.
Right.
And so what happens is that so many times people want to, and you talk about this often, it's so good, that people want to control whenever they get into something like their kid's not doing right. They're in fear that their kid is going to make a mistake that's going to be costly to the child, costly to the parent, potentially embarrassing to the parent,
Right.
that brings shame to the family. I mean, there could be a number of things that parent has a fear of, and when you're in fear, you control.
Right.
Well, why are we so afraid of our kids making mistakes? We made mistakes. Here we are. And most people made mistakes, and the ones that have come out of them, most of them made their mistakes underneath the parents that did not understand what we're talking about right now. How
Right.
much better off can your kids be if it doesn't mean you have to endorse what they're doing,
Correct.
but allow them to have the consequences. Now, not when they're real little, you don't allow them to just punch their brother in the face and be like, now, what do you think about that? They're going to be like, it felt great because he took my Lego. There's a place for punishment within raising your kids, but as they get older, the punishment culture goes by the wayside, and now you have this place to where you allow their consequences to speak to them until they're willing to listen to what you have to say.
Right.
But as long as they feel like they're being judged and shamed, they're going to listen to anything you have to say. It doesn't work. It really is a form of legalism, and the legalism has not caused anybody to run to the Lord.
Right.
Grace causes people to
Right.
run to the Lord.
And honestly, what happens in that kind of environment, what you say, they do the exact opposite.
Yeah.
If you say, oh, you should go to the right, then they go to the left because they want to. Sometimes they do it out of spite of like, who are you to tell me what to do? But sometimes they're like, no, like I'm not going to listen to anything you have to say. I'm
Just because I know better.
right.
Even though they don't.
Right. And so it's helping them to be able to navigate their thought processes and just helping to like steer them in the right direction, and by asking them a lot of questions, and like, have you thought, if you do this, have you thought about this possibility because of that? Like, there's a cause and there's effect. Have you seen the effect of what it is that you're going to do versus maybe if you chose to do this, then this was or even asking them like, what are you after in this moment? Like, what is this thing that you are going towards? So if they can name that, and then helping them to even decide, okay, so what are some different steps or ways that you could go about getting what it is that you want. And so by you just asking them those questions, bringing that out, then they're going to come to the decision all on their own anyway. And Now you've just led them, but you didn't constrain them.
Right.
They made the choice themselves, and then they're more apt to.
We're made to be free thinkers.
Right.
So we have to train our kids into becoming free thinkers
That's
that are
right.
loved. And when we have answers and they know that they're loved by us, then they're more likely to come to us for the answers that they need. But they have to know that there's a judgment-free zone, and they can talk to us about things. So to finish up, here's the thing. It's the challenge. It's the question challenge.
Okay.
The challenge is that go to your kids if they're of age. If you have a 5-year-old, that's not going to work. But I would say 9, 10, 11, on older, but especially teenage years, go to your child and sit down, maybe one parent at a time, maybe both parents, however you feel like you need to do it, and ask them, do you feel like you can talk to me about anything? Ask the question just like this, on a scale of 1 to 10, do you feel like you can come and talk to me about anything? And then if it's a 10, say, well, why do you feel that way? If it's a 1, say, why do you feel that way? Stay totally neutral, let them throw things on you, and then if you need to change, go back to the Lord and ask the Lord to show you how to change. If things are going good, then continue going on that path and say, thank you for sharing. I'm glad you feel like you could tell me things. I just wanted to make sure.
That's right.
Do it.
It's so good.
Take the challenge and do it.
Thank you for listening in on this conversation. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review. Share it with your friends and on your socials. For more information about Ward Ministries, check out wardmen.org. If this podcast is encouraging you on your marriage and family, we want to hear about it. Email us at info@wardmen.org, and make sure you keep your eye out weekly for the latest podcast on marriage and family.